Hi, Shannon here. I have something that I want to say, but I don't know how to say it, so I'm going to beat around the bush for a second. I have felt something coming for a long time, and I think when I was little, I don't know who it was, but they would talk about the coming revolution, and I didn't know what that meant, and it's kind of in the background of my head, like from before I was a thinking person, like before I was conscious. I had one of my best friends growing up. Her dad had a gun shop, and under his gun shop, I lived in the country, rural America, and under his gun shop, he had a stockpile of food and weapons for the World War III. And that was long before the preppers were cool. I'm not even sure there was a name prepper, like it was in the 80s. And so I think I've been thinking about this a lot, and maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. My husband thinks he's like, oh, you have an anxiety disorder. It's not. That's all it is. It's just you have an anxiety disorder. During the pandemic, my husband and I lived in separate states. He was going to school and I was working. And I kept telling him, this was 2020 in the fall, I kept saying, we were heading into the election, and I said, I lived somewhere it was like 90-some% Trump voters, and I'm not a Trump voter. So I said, all I could see was blood. And I kept saying, like, and I was in a really dark place, right? It's fine. And then January 6th happened, and I was like, okay. Because what I said was, like, if Trump wins, we protest, his people shoot us. If Biden wins, they shoot us. I just, all I could see was blood. And my husband's just like, you're just being paranoid. And so I was listening to Timothy Snyder. He's an expert. He's a historian. He studies authoritarianism. And I listened to him, and he just recently moved to Canada, not just because of the Trump administration, but he said he kept waiting for July 4th, because it's our Independence Day, right? He kept thinking something was coming then. And he said, well, maybe the 14th, which is what I have been feeling. And I feel like, okay, this is an expert. This is somebody who knows this sort of thing. He's like, maybe the 14th. So I don't know, if you don't know what the 14th is, June 14th is the 250th anniversary of our military. And it's also Trump's birthday. So I'm not sure they're on exactly the same day, but they're having, Trump has wanted a military parade since his first time in office, at least. And it's very authoritarian. Like, that's what dictators do. Dictators have military parades. Democracies don't do that. And so he wants this big parade, and it's going to be millions and millions of dollars to cover this cost. He wants to bring tanks and planes, and I don't know. Back when he was president, he wanted to do a photo op. And remember, this is the one where he had the Bible upside down. And I kept thinking, like, if you're a Christian, why do you not think there's something wrong with that? He's holding it upside down. Like, he doesn't know how to say 1 Corinthians. Like, he obviously is not a Christian. It's so very clear to anybody that, like, isn't his follower. I have a dog right beside me. She's sniffing. But he had to clear, they had to clear the area. So they had to force the protesters out of the area. And he's like, well, why can't we just shoot them? And I was like, that's not okay. How do you not know that's not okay? And so when he was reelected, my husband, again, he's like, you're paranoid, you have an anxiety disorder, He's a psychiatry resident, so he's like a doctor. He calls himself a baby doc. He's a doctor, but he's still learning. He's like in an internship. So you said this is my anxiety, but I said Trump wants to do tariffs, and it's going to be bad. We're going to have supply chain problems. And so from the election on, we started, I started buying extra food, and I spent like $50 extra a month. So it's been like 6 months, and I stocked food up in my house for that. And I said, I don't know that something's going to happen, but I'd like to be prepared. When we were in Iowa a few years ago during the beginning of the pandemic, we couldn't get toilet paper, and I think it did something to me. And if you're rural, you understand, like, you need to have supplies because it's going to be, are the dogs coming in? I have 2 big dogs. If you run out of toilet paper in the country, or milk or eggs or whatever, you know, it's 9 miles or more, whatever it is, to get to a grocery store. So you just stock up. My husband says it's like living with somebody that lived during the Great Depression. Okay. So stocking up June 14th, and if you'd seen the video I did a month or two ago, I forget how long it's been, we had an intruder. He didn't actually, he didn't actually break into our house. He tried to break into my husband's car, and he kind of terrorized us for about 2 hours outside our house, beeping his horn, like laying on his horn. He threw something in our house, and he was out there making weird noises. And so he went to a psych ward. I guess he went to a drug rehab, and he escaped. He escaped from drug rehab, and then he had the ER, and they put him in the psych ward. So he clearly is mentally ill enough that the doctor in an emergency room is like, "Yep, you should be in the psych ward." It's not me. And so we were very worried. And my husband at that point was like, I think he started listening to me, you know, but he's like, this is weird. I don't like this. And so I told him, I think we should have a gun. And so I am super liberal. My dog is flailing. I'm super liberal. And like, you know, my husband's like, we throw flowers, liberals. But I just feel this growing sense inside that something bad is coming. So I don't know if it's from being raised in rural America. I always call it ruraltopia. Or if it's that time in Iowa where we couldn't get toilet paper, my dog's getting up. Or it was the time in Arizona when I felt unsafe. It's just all of those things. All those things. So I convinced my husband that we should, and I didn't take any convincing. We finally bought a handgun, and I got my husband a shotgun because he is over 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. He's like, I can't use that little handgun. I guess my point is, what I didn't want to say is that I think it's time that progressives start arming themselves. That sounds so insane. It's a 7-day waiting period, so like maybe go today. That was my deadline for myself, was June 14th. So it'd be June 7th. I'd have to, you know. And I'm not saying something's happening. I'm not saying something's going to happen. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they're all armed to the teeth, and some of them are crazy. And I don't know what's coming, but it's not going to be good. So I think, like, if there is a problem with supply chains, they're talking, you know, mid-June or so, which is the same time as the military parade, and I'm pretty sure Trump will just shoot the protesters. He got rid of all the people in the military that he didn't like, so he already did that. I keep saying, like, if he was smart, he would wait and dismantle the government more than he has, because he's done a lot to dismantle our democracy, but he has not fully done it. And if he throws a big stink on June 14th, because he has protesters, that might actually save our democracy, because then people will stand up. Because they say that we have, was it 3.6 million? I forget, 5 million. We had so many people protesting in some of the big protests lately, and they're happening all over the country. But there's a certain threshold. I say that, I forget if it's like a percentage of the population. Maybe it was 3.7% was the percentage, but you had to have so many, and it was probably like 10 million people, and we weren't quite there, whatever it was. We need more people to protest, you know, to save our democracy. I've kind of come to terms with the fact that, like, something's going to happen, because the reason people in rural America are very angry, and the reason they vote for Trump, is because they've been shit on, for a very long time. You know, like, when I was little, I grew up I was born in the late 70s. My parents, my grandparents, everybody worked at a manufacturing plant, and it closed down. It went to North Carolina. And then, so part of my family went to North Carolina with that plant, and then it closed, you know, the plants closed down in North Carolina. And they went to Mexico, and now they're in China or elsewhere. In these places that they're being hollowed out, there isn't services. Like, in rural America, you can't get to a doctor. Like, there's wait lists. You know, to have basic services, you know, you might travel an hour to go to the dentist there. I was traveling over an hour to get to a dentist. And so, like, their life has been hard for decades, and we've just ignored them. So, you know, all the other industrialized nations have universal health coverage of some sort. They all have some kind of leave for new babies, for being sick. They all have vacations. You know, if you're in Europe, you have like 6 weeks of vacation or something. And the majority of people in these places have no vacation, no sick leave at all. Like, if you're sick, you can't pay your rent. Like, that's the way that it is. So we need to do something to help these people. We can't keep going this way. It's getting worse and worse. It's already too bad. I've lived in 3 rural areas. It's pretty bad. And if you're in the cities, it's bad. It's like most people live in these like suburban spaces, and they circle with people that don't have wants. You know, they, oh no, I can't buy the latest gaming system. Ooh, you know, like that's, and like, you know, like for people in these poor areas, it's like, how can I get to the doctor? How can I get, if I'm, you know, they're going to get, I used to run a testing, I was a library director, and I ran a testing facility at this community college as part of my job. And we literally had to give gas money to the students to come and take the test because they had to drive, you know, an hour to get to the testing site, which we ran too, you know, because they didn't have vehicles, and they'd have to have someone take a day off from work to take them to get their GED or their high school equivalency, what they call GED. They don't have anything, and we've ignored them forever. I lived that life most of my life, right? That's what it is. So I feel it coming. I don't know what that means. You know, like in 2020, I said I see blood, but I didn't know what that meant. I'm coming to terms with that. Either it's going to get worse, or we're going to have a revolution, which sounds so nuts. So, you know, I've stockpiled. I have food, water, medicine, and now I have guns in my house, which I've never wanted. I've never, ever wanted that. So just be prepared. I sound like a nutcase. I was thinking, I'm going to put in my journal later, I was thinking on my walk this morning, like, I hope that if anybody reads the journal or listens to this video, they laugh at me and say, oh, you're so silly. That didn't happen. You silly thing. You silly goose. You know? My daughter and I, she's 8. We were reading Anne Frank this fall. She played Gretel in the community theater last year. I just hope that they laugh at what I'm saying. I hope that they're not looking at me and my family in the same way that my daughter and I look at Anne Frank and her family. I'd rather be laughed at than that. So, good luck, everyone. Stay safe.